Hello, welcome to True Crime Broads. This is Crystal,
And Renee.
and we are so happy that you joined us for episode 14. And we are here for the first time after having our last two guests on, and that was really exciting. And I think Renee and I are going to start off by talking about that for a little bit. And then, of course, we have to acknowledge that this is a very unfortunate anniversary. This is the fourth anniversary of Missy Bevers' murder.
Oh my gosh, I'm just so shocked that we're at the 4 year mark. And we say that every year, that we're shocked that we're at the another year that has passed and nothing has happened. And I'm just so sad.
Yeah, and we've harped on this on every episode, but we really don't know what's going on in the case. We've had little to no communication from MPD in years at this point, and it's just it's difficult to be a follower of this case and someone who's concerned about Missy and her family when you don't know what's going on.
Right.
But we're doing our best. That's why we order the search warrants. That's why we stay on top of this and talk to people all the time and see if we can glean any information about this case, because we know there are many, many people out there that feel exactly the same way we do, and they want to see justice. And
Right.
one of the ways that we're trying to bring good content on this topic is to have guests on. And we had the huge, huge honor of having two heavy hitters on in a row. We had Joseph Scott Morgan on, and then our very last episode prior to this one, we had John Kelly on. And they were just fantastic guests, fascinating, so wonderful to even have a guest. But we really started off strong. We coming out of the gates with those two guys, didn't we,
Right.
Renee? That was
Yeah.
fun. So thank you for setting that up. Renee's actually the one that set that up. And actually, one of our awesome, awesome listeners, his name is Dale. He suggested that we reach out to John Kelly. So that was a cool, really cool suggestion that worked out great.
It really did. I'm so glad he suggested it. And it kind of, put us on the right track of, kind of like some more ideas on, different people to talk to get more insight and, things like that maybe we didn't have before because of their, expertise and knowledge in the field that they're in.
Well, yes. And I'm sure people are pretty sick of hearing us saying the same things over and over at that point. We had done so many episodes together, which is great. But that was a wonderful, it was time for a change, and that worked out really well. And I think that, what did you learn from, I guess we should start with Joseph Scott Morgan since he was on first. What were some of the highlights for you? And then I'll tell mine.
Well, the fact of Joseph Scott Morgan was the one that we did first. And I think we did that because I'm trying to remember why because it kind of, we scheduled them kind of in the opposite. But Joseph Scott Morgan is a death investigator, and he's a forensics specialist. And he was very helpful in a lot of different ways. I mean, he talked about different things to look for in people that would possibly be the type of person that would be able to commit this type of crime. I felt like that was really, really interesting. And then on the forensic side, we talked about, DNA, and he explained the DNA to us really well. Do you remember that? He talked about the DNA and what kind of broke down the terminology that the police used, which
Yes.
was mixed and
Partial.
partial sample. So that was very interesting, and that was very helpful because it kind of gave us an idea of what it could be, but at the same time that there could be a possibility in the very near future that small partial mixed sample could be all they need.
Yeah. And he talked about touch DNA, and he obviously knows a heck of a lot more about that stuff than we do. And, something else that I thought was really, really cool that I wasn't expecting him to share, and it really meant a lot to me, is he was talking about how when he was doing these autopsies and he was doing these death investigations and he was working on cases, He said sometimes he would just sob thinking that I don't really have anything for these families. And
Yeah.
that just really was insightful because I tend to think of those types of people, and I shouldn't, but I picture guys like in lab coats and they're just there doing their scientific stuff, and to think that they're actually getting emotionally involved and they actually are feeling for these victims the same way that we are, it really hit home for me. And I can only imagine, keeping that in mind, what a difficult job that would be and what a toll it would take on you, not just seeing dead bodies that have been killed all the time, but you're also thinking about the families, and you really, really want to get answers for those family members who lost their loved one. It's just, I can only imagine the toll that would take, and just feeling the world's weight on your shoulders because you want to do the right thing and you want to help them. And so many cases go unsolved. So many murderers don't face justice. And I can only imagine how that must feel for those people, those men and women working in that position.
Yeah. No, I know it is something to think about. We tend to think that they just, kind of do their job and go on with things, but that's not the case at all, and it really hits home to know that they not only are doing their job, but it actually means something to them, that they really
Yeah.
want to help with, you know,
I never thought, I always think of maybe police officers and investigators, detectives, those types of people getting emotionally involved, but it never really occurred to me that the people working the science aspect of it would get involved like that. And I just thought that was really neat that he would share that with us too. He was so personable, and Mr. Morgan was just so down to earth. He had so many funny expressions. He's from Alabama. Had some
good.
super, I loved the way he talked. It was really fun and entertaining. And like you said, Renee, I bet he's a fantastic professor. He's a
Oh,
current
yeah.
college professor for our listeners. If our listeners did not hear the Joseph Scott Morgan episode, it was 2 episodes back. It is phenomenal. He just is such a good speaker and so engaging, and the content was fantastic. So I can't recommend that episode enough. It was lots of fun, and he said a lot
Yeah,
of funny things too.
he did his bubblegum, chewed up bubblegum. That was
I love it.
hilarious. He,
It's fantastic.
the thing that about it, that I found was, and the reason I said that about him being, that way, being a really good professor, was because, I've taken plenty, and I'm sure you have too. Are you there?
I'm here.
Oh, I thought I lost you. I'm sure you have too. I'm taking plenty of classes that you're just literally falling asleep, and he's teaching something, or telling us about things that we're literally just, I'm sure, way above our heads. But he made it interesting. He made me like.
Well, hello. Sorry about that. We're back. We had
Yeah,
we lost our connection there, but okay, Renee, go ahead and continue what you were saying about, you were explaining how you think that Mr. Morgan's an awesome lecturer at college.
yeah. I feel like he's a really good one, because I've taken many classes. I'm sure you've done the same. That, some people are just, they put you straight to sleep, and everything he was telling us was, way above our heads, I'm sure, but very interesting. And I learned a few things just from the little bit of conversation we had with him. So I just bet his students just love him. You know?
Oh yeah. That's a class you look forward to every day.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then of course, he did a segment with Miss Nancy Grace about the Missy Bevers case. So he had previously had an interest in her case, already. So it was really nice of him to come on and talk to us, about it and give us his insight.
That was fantastic. And then our next guest the following week was John Kelly. He's a criminal profiler. He has a YouTube channel called John Kelly Profiler, and it is really good if you haven't watched it. He is going really taking a deep dive, like we are with the missing Bevers case. He's doing a really deep dive into the Delphi murders. If you're not familiar with that, it's a small town in Indiana where there was a perpetrator caught on a little bit of one of the victims' cell phones that they were able to recover. But unfortunately, 2 young girls were murdered, and that is unsolved. But anyway, Mr. Kelly has a really good YouTube series on that case, and he's been a criminal profiler for a long time, and He is his background is in psychology, he's clinical, he's a psychotherapist. And what would you say, Renee, were the high points for you from Mr. Kelly being on?
I enjoyed hearing him talk about the different things that would be, like the person that would more than likely be the type of person that had pulled off this murder. Um, I enjoyed hearing him. It's like he's a profiler, and it just knowing the type of person that does something, you know what I'm saying? Like to be able to pinpoint it, it just amazes me. And you can tell him and I guess he works with several other profilers, investigators, that type of thing, and they have this. It's a web page and it's called Stalk. And I meant to talk about that, but we were so deep into what we were talking about, we never had a chance. But he has a website called Stalk, and it's System to Apprehend Lethal Killers.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and I thought that was really neat. We didn't really get to talk about that, but overall, I enjoyed his our having him on as a guest. He was very insightful. He had a lot of good ideas on the type of person this would be, and I don't know. I enjoyed it overall. He was very personable. He was friendly, and it's really nice to have people like that. That you don't feel you know what I'm saying, nervous to talk to.
Yes, he was also extremely personable and a lot of fun to talk to.
Just
And
humble.
yeah, he was very humble too, just like Mr. Morgan. And I really got a lot out of that conversation as well. And I like that sort of toward the end, Mr. Kelly talked about, the types of people, if this, of course, we don't know who killed Missy, but just sort of bouncing around different theories using his expertise in profiling, when we kind of um, went down the path of talking about people who attack women and maybe have problems with women. He was very insightful, of course, in that area. And I thought it was really interesting that he brought out how some men that do have that issue with women, that rejection, whether not necessarily in this case, because we don't know yet, but how rejection can sort of flip a switch in certain men's obviously unstable men's minds to where they will do something this drastic to a woman. It's really unbelievable to think that could happen, but unfortunately those people are out there. We've seen proof of it. I think on one, the extreme would be like would be a Ted Bundy type. But yeah, I found that to be really insightful because I had brought up different theories and rumors that we've heard around town. And I said, one theory was that it was rejection. And I made the comment, that seems like a pretty extreme reaction to being rejected. And he stopped me and said, not really. That there's a certain type of a profile of a person, a murderer, that rejection can trigger some
Right.
violence, this
Yeah.
extreme violence. So I really walked away with a lot of interesting information from both of those gentlemen. And I just could not be happier that they came on. It was just this thrill and an honor. So, and they each said that they would be happy to come back again sometime. So maybe after we get some progress in this case, if any information comes out, they can come back on, or maybe in a few months, even if nothing's changed, maybe we can, have them back on. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, they did say both of them, I believe, that they would definitely come back. And I believe John Kelly said he's going to talk to some of
His team.
team about coming on, or
That's
not
right.
really coming on, but talking to them about it and seeing what we could, get together on. So that would be really good. Um,
And I know he's really deep right now. His channel is covering the Delphi murders, but I think that would be amazing if he would tackle the Missy Bevers case at some point. He's definitely intrigued by the case, and I have a feeling that he will feature this case at some point, and that would just be a delight. So,
yeah. I mean,
and that would really help. He has a lot of viewers on his YouTube channel, so that would really help raise the profile of the Missy Bevers case even more, which is all we care about. That's what we're here for.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely. It's I think one of the reasons why this case is so intriguing to people, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this, but I'm just, voicing my opinion, but I really feel like it's because we have the person on video, and it just drives you crazy because you just feel like there's got to be something there that will lead to the killer,
Oh,
and I believe that there is something. I mean, there's always
absolutely.
something that we are missing or not seeing or not recognizing or whatever. But it's just amazing that
You,
these
yeah,
things on video. I mean, it just blows
yeah,
your mind.
sorry. Yeah, you bring up a really interesting point talking about this perpetrator dancing around on camera all that time. And it reminds me of when Tim contacted us last night. Was that last night or the night before? I'm losing track of time.
I believe
Um, in quar- yeah, quarantine days are different than regular days. But yeah, I remember Tim saying, "Hey, I'm listening to this live thing," and we jumped on it. And it was, I don't know if our listeners are familiar with Armchair Detective. Um, is he Australian, Renee?
I believe so. He doesn't. He
Okay,
sounds more like he's I don't know.
British.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so Armchair Detective is a YouTube channel you might want to check out. And last night they did a live stream, but of course it's available now to watch. It's like 2 hours long. The first half is about the Delphi case that we already talked about tonight, out in Indiana. And then the second half was at the Missy Bevers case. And they had a really good gate expert on there doing gate analysis. And, Renee, you brought up a really interesting point. We've got this video. I'm pretty sure they've got I mean, surely law enforcement has gotten some kind of either gait analysis software involved, some kind of gait experts beyond Dr. Nuremberg, the forensic podiatrist. The guy that was on Armchair Detective doing the gait analysis was fantastic, by the way. His name is Barry Wise, and I hope to see more of him in the future. He would be a great asset to the Missy Bevers case with the gate being such a big part of it. But you bring up an excellent point. We've got this person on camera, and I cannot tell you how many people said this at the beginning, and I was one of them. Is you see the perpetrator on camera, and the news people would say, well, they have 28 minutes of footage or whatever. You're thinking, oh, there's no way this won't get solved. I mean, I just remember thinking, oh, he's on camera. I mean, yeah, the person's covered up, but that'll get solved. And here we are 4 years later, it is not solved. But yeah, you bring up a great point. That's a frustrating aspect of this case. We have the person on camera, all different angles, walking all over the place with a very distinct little limp and some out turn of the feet and some hunched shoulders and a protruding head. I mean, this isn't everybody in the world. Now, a lot of people do walk with a funny gait that, because we commented on that, Renee. All of us have. Like suddenly the whole world walks like the perpetrator, right?
Right.
Um, but to the trained eye, to people who know what they're doing, unlike myself, there's massive differences. And I thought one thing that Barry Wise did that was really entertaining and really interesting is he was able to point out really specific and technical reasons why he did not think that was Randy Bevers. And we've had so many people over the years say that that looks just like Randy Bevers in the video. So it was really cool to hear an expert say, you know what, here's a couple of reasons, and they were technical reasons, and I'm not going to try to repeat them here. I would, because I don't know. I don't remember exactly the way he worded it, but it was good and it was technical and it's stuff that I don't have any training in. But for our listeners who want to watch Armchair Detective, that was a fantastic episode. And like I said, I hope that we see more of Barry Wise. But
What was his expertise
um,
again?
he is apparently a physical therapist. He had mentioned, now I didn't hear his intro. By the time Tim emailed us and told us to jump on, it was in progress. So I didn't hear him get introduced.
Yeah, I didn't either.
But yeah, I need to go back and watch that part, come to think of it. I should have done that now that you mention it. But he apparently is a physical therapist. He has a lot of medical knowledge, you can tell. He does some personal training, but he definitely has more training than would be necessary to be a personal trainer. So I think Tim is right. I think he's probably a physical therapist. He was talking in the Armchair Detective episode last night about how he does help people with their gait and help people. It sounded exactly like when I went to physical therapy after I had the third baby. when one hip was higher than the other. He said helps people work on their gait and getting it back to their normal gait when something is off. And so that's what a physical therapist does. So I believe that's his training and his expertise. And I know that physical therapists are one of the few non-medical doctors that MDs actually take seriously, because my mom went to my physical therapist for her knee, and her MD was waiting to hear the physical therapist's analysis of, how to move forward, which I thought was interesting, because usually medical doctors only listen to other medical doctors. So I was impressed with that. So yeah, so anyway, Barry Wise was fantastic, and also a very engaging and interesting speaker, as well as having technical um information. So
Yeah.
that was a good show. Highly recommend that. We'll give Armchair Detective a huge shout out. And it was a huge surprise, but the Armchair Detective host had Tim on recently. Remember when we watched that together?
Yes.
And he all of a sudden saw Tim. You know how in those live chats everyone's chatting and commenting, and Tim popped on and started commenting. I was waiting to see you comment. I never saw you come on, but I saw Tim pop on. And Tim, apparently the host of Armchair Detective, saw Tim commenting, and he said, "We're going to send you a link to have you join in on the conversation." So it was totally impromptu, but Tim ended up coming on and was able to talk to Barry and ask him a couple of questions. So that was kind of
You know, it
fun.
was crazy because he was trying to help me. Tim was trying to help me figure out how to do a YouTube thing. And he stumbled across a video or the live on YouTube while he was looking for something to send me. And
Yeah.
then the
Yeah. Yeah.
same
Yeah.
thing happened to me, but I didn't realize what was happening. I kind of had it in the background. So I missed all of pretty much everything when it was happening. I kind of found it at the end, but I didn't get to see the whole thing. I remember hearing a few things that he said, like he said he's 30% sure. I forgot. I'm going to have to go back and listen to it again because I missed it, the entire thing. So I'll definitely have to do
Yeah,
that.
it was really good. He was a very engaging guest, and that was a really good find. I don't know where Armchair Detective found Barry Wise, how they got connected, but that was a good program. And so yeah, so here we are at the 4-year anniversary. We definitely wanted to do an episode not only to recap the wonderful guests that we had on our last 2 episodes, but we also really just want to acknowledge um Missy's life, and let her and let her family know, and her friends know, that we're still out here doing it. We're still working. We're still hoping to find someone who can bring enough attention to this case to maybe get something done. If anyone out there listening happens to be a private investigator, or happens to have access to some kind of technology you think would help in this case, please don't hesitate to contact Midlothian Police. I know that Dr. Nirenberg, the forensic podiatrist that worked on this case, um, we read that he contacted them. He reached out to MPD. He is a podiatrist in Indiana. So, you don't have to be local necessarily to help out on aspects of the case. So I just really hope that, we're at the 4-year mark, and I hope that just going forward, somehow, some way, our podcast efforts can maybe make some kind of a difference here. What do you think, Renee? What do you think our goals for the next year should
Oh,
be?
absolutely. You know, I know that some of the thinking that I've been on is like looking for a retired homicide detective, anything like that. Any person,
Perfect.
somebody that's retired from that field, we would like to maybe have on our podcast because we want to continue getting other insight, other information, other thoughts, other opinions. On this case, and definitely somebody who has been in that field would definitely be a good person to have on the podcast, because I think the more insight we get into not only into this case, but the type of person that could do this. Just anything that we can learn from other people's point of view, I think is going to be nothing but beneficial. So if anybody knows somebody
Right.
in those fields, please let us know. Message us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever your preference in social media is, and we're on all of them, and just let us know what, someone that you might know that'll be in those fields that would be interested in doing the podcast, because I think it really does help. It helps all of us,
Yeah.
learning more into the case.
And something else I like about having on a retired investigator would be that they could also maybe provide us some insight into how law enforcement works. Joseph Scott Morgan really helped me with this. I meant to mention this when we were talking about him. He said, law enforcement isn't going to release stuff. They're working on it. He was reassuring us that this is very much an active case.
Right.
It's tempting for those of us in the public to look at the situation and say it just must be cold. But he was saying that from his point of view, having worked inside countless cases, that this is how it looks from the outside. It's just quiet. They could make an arrest tomorrow.
Right.
So that's kind of exciting to hear that it's not necessarily gloom and doom. The fact that we haven't heard anything in so long, that's just how a lot of departments choose to operate, especially if they have some kind of sensitive stuff going on that they don't want the public speculating on or blabbing about. And that also kind of makes me feel torn because I want to talk about certain things on the podcast, but I don't want to be the idiot that ruins it for law enforcement. Not that I have that power, but you know what I mean? I just don't want to be the one that blabs something that they really don't want people talking about. That's really been, you and I have discussed this a lot over the years. We really don't want to be that person, but gosh, after so much time passes, it's hard not to be. But I think we're going to have to control that somehow, some way, and still get our information out, walk that fine line.
Right.
Because we
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say we might come across information in our digging and looking at search warrants and this, that, and the other and talking to people. And it might not be the best idea to broadcast all that stuff. I'm really torn because I want to. And I'm not saying we have information we're holding back. I'm certainly not saying that. But I'm just saying that every once in a while we'll dig something up and go, I don't know if we should talk about that. But hey, just for our listeners, we usually do. So we usually do. So
well,
and I haven't missed anything.
Right.
Yet.
What'd you say?
I just said they haven't really missed anything yet because we do.
After I said, I thought I missed something that you said. I thought I misunderstood you.
Oh no, I just said we haven't. Our listeners haven't missed anything because we usually do blab it.
Yeah, we do. Well, another thing that I wanted to mention that Joseph Scott Morgan touched on, and I think you were the one that asked the question about. I'm sorry, you know how it is. I lost my train of thought. About how they work the case and why we think it hasn't been solved, and he said that he thinks it's typically, and he wasn't speaking specifically to MPD. He was talking about a lot of unsolved cases in general, but he said he thinks it's just laziness. And what he meant by that, I don't think he really meant it as derogatory. What he meant by that is that a lot of police departments, we have so much technology these days that they tend to think, oh, well, we're just going to, they're going to get back with us and they're going to test the DNA and they're going to do this and they're going to do this and it's just going to be solved. So they just kind of sit back and wait for all this information to come to them. And then when it doesn't, they're just kind of like, oh, well, what do we do? And, the thing is that a lot of things that solves these cases is just flat out going out and doing the footwork of going out and speaking to the people that were closest to whatever case it is we're talking about. But in the Missy Bevers case, friends and family, Camp Gladiator participants, maybe some people that she was connected to in Thrive, neighbors, whoever. It's that type of footwork and that type of going back and starting at the what I'm saying in the beginning, like it, should have been done in the beginning to get some of the answers that they're going to need to possibly solve the case. Because if you notice on Cold Case, what is her name? Is it Kelly Siegler? I forget her name.
I'm not sure.
But anyway, that's exactly what she does. She goes to these people, I guess they send in, their loved one was murdered, 25 years ago, and it's a cold case, and they want her and her team to come and, try and solve their murder. And that's exactly what she does. She goes in and go meet somewhere, and they literally start on a dry erase board writing down, okay, who were the suspects in this case in the beginning? Okay, who was her best friend? Who was, his, wife? Did he have an ex-wife? Did he have you know what I'm saying? They just kind of cover all the bases, and they literally start over. And that's how they get these cases solved. So I really found it
Yeah.
interesting that he touched on that because it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, of course it does. And I think that, I don't it's really interesting. I know we all have waffled back and forth on what phase of the investigation we think that MPD is
Mhm.
in. I mean, I think they started close and worked their way out, like you're supposed to, and eliminated people based on whatever data that was available and that they found, and search warrants, and worked and worked and worked, and then sort of fanned out and followed leads. And I mean, I really feel like they've done everything. I don't really feel like, when you said 25 years, that made me cringe, because I certainly hope that Missy's family doesn't have to wait 25 years for justice, but it could be. We don't know. We just don't
Right.
know what's going on. But I'm hoping that they are inching toward an arrest. I really do. But it's impossible to know what phase they're at. It's such, 4 years ago they started off just working and working and working on this case, and we thought we were following it, we thought we knew what was going on, and then they just stopped informing us at some point. And it's tempting to think that they stopped informing us because they stopped working on it, and I really don't think that's the case, especially after talking to Joseph Scott Morgan in particular. He really made me realize that things are happening, and I could be totally wrong. I know that one of our friends that we talk to a lot, our mutual friend, thinks that they're not doing anything and it's cold, and that's cool. That's not a bad theory either. So we simply don't know. The lack of communication has driven us all crazy. I think there's a lot of people in the public that agree with us that, we'd like to hear any kind of an update. They could at least say, hey, remember how we told you to look for a Nissan Altima? We figured that out. Don't worry. You can stop doing that. Or they could tell us at least that they have their eye on a suspect. We know that we haven't, communicated with the public. So we want to assure you that you're safe, because we do have someone under surveillance, and we don't believe they'll strike again. That kind of information. They don't have to give away anything about the investigation, just to fill us in a little bit. So that part is frustrating. I wish they would open up just a tiny little bitty bit.
No, I totally agree with you. And the thing about it is that a cold case is it's a case that it's still open, but it's just one that they're looking for new evidence. So I think that people think that a cold case is one that police aren't working on. But if they really don't have any new evidence, you know what I'm saying? So I think it's kind of confusing.
Mhm.
So it kind of seems derogatory towards the police department because it's like, oh, it's a cold case because they're not working on it. It doesn't really mean that they're not working on it. It just means that there's not any new evidence for them to, really delve into. And that's why I just thought it was interesting
Right.
what he said. I think personally that they should just, kind of start over, and I don't know. Obviously, I don't work for the police department, so I don't really know the rules. I don't know if it's something that they can just do or if they just have to keep going from where they're at. But that was just my thoughts on it. But I do think that it gets confused. A lot of people just think it's a cold case means that they're just not working on it at all, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. But yeah, so once again, we don't know what's going on in the case. And we do wish the MPD would speak up just a little bit without giving anything away. But that hasn't happened. And what's interesting, Renee, is we are recording this the night before. We tend to record in the evening, fairly late, and it's the night before Missy's 4-year anniversary is tomorrow. Am I correct?
Correct.
So I'm really surprised that we haven't seen anything yet. I guess the coronavirus has kind of taken over, and we had our governor of Texas spoke today on kind of what the game plan is for a lot of stuff. So maybe that kind of stuff took precedent in the media, and MPD was able to sort of step back, which they've been preferring to do lately anyway. So I don't know if there's. What do you think? Do you think we're going to see any kind of a splash in the media tomorrow for the anniversary?
It's weird. It's hard to say, but in the past, somebody has always done something, even if it was just a repeat, a recap, whatever you want to call it. So you would think, and normally several news stations would normally do it a couple days before, I guess, so they could be the first one. I don't know what their reasoning is, But we haven't, like you said, heard from anyone. I haven't seen anything. I haven't seen any news articles, so maybe not.
Yeah, it's quiet so far, and we usually do hear something the night
Yeah,
before, the day before. So I'm kind of surprised, but then again, like we said, this is an unusual. This isn't your normal, April.
right, exactly.
We're having the pandemic, which we've never seen in our lifetimes.
Right.
So that could be affecting the way they're going to react to her anniversary. I
I guess
don't
that's the
know.
good thing about what we do is it doesn't keep us from doing it. It actually gives us more time to do it. We've had probably more time to focus on this than we probably ever had before because we have been unable to work like we normally do. So that has, kept us, being able to put more, time and energy into this than we would normally have, which I guess has been, obviously good. Gave us something to do. It gave us a purpose. So
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Oh, so with that being said, we've actually had a few I mean, listeners ask us what we do for a living. Do you want to tell everybody real quick what you do, and I'll tell what I
yeah, it's
do?
kind of interesting. Me and Crystal, we have a lot of stuff in common. We're both multitaskers and the kind of people that are constantly. Me and her will be running around, grabbing food for the family, doing all this stuff. So we're both multifaceted, I guess you could say. But
Yeah.
I actually have a small business. I have a small business called Southern Comfort and More, and we sell sheets and bedding, things like that. We travel all over Texas and Oklahoma with our bedding and sell them. So it's kind of a different type of business. It's not one where customers come to us, but we come to the customer. So it's kind of interesting. It's a lot of fun. We get to travel. So that always makes it nice. So you're not just sitting at home all the time. Our kids are grown, so we don't have to, be here 24/7. So we enjoy that. Of course, my husband, he has a different full time job. He's a foreman at a company, so we were doing it together. But I think it's not really the best idea to work with your husband all the time where you're together 24/7. So we made that change. And I also have a beauty license, and I don't currently do hair, but I do have a license. That's kind of it's something I've always been interested in. And ever since I was very young, I don't know why I didn't take it in high school. It would have been the easiest thing to do or the best choice, but I didn't. And so I waited until I was in my 40s, got my license. And I just found that working with women in the beauty industry is a little more difficult than I had anticipated because I seem, I'm pretty easygoing. And so I chose to keep it though. So I do keep my license up. I just don't do it. So anyway, that's what I do in a
Well, that's cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I didn't mean to turn this into an infomercial about Renee and me, but I did want to let our listeners know because we do get that
we
question every
do,
now
we
and then.
do.
And I thought, you know what? We really haven't introduced ourselves very well. So, yes, if you want to check out Renee's company, it's really cool. It's called Southern Comfort and More. She is on Facebook. So, look her up and you can order stuff. I'm not just a co host, I'm also a customer.
Right?
I'm also a client. I sound like that guy for the old
Right.
commercial. No, but I mean, I have purchased things from her, pillows, some sheets, and it's all really high quality and good prices. I think you'll be happy if you check her out.
Thank you.
And then what I do is a little less interesting and a little
No,
more straightforward.
you do a great job.
I, oh, thanks, you're sweet. I am simply a residential real estate agent, a realtor, if you will, and I do leases and I list homes, and I also work with buyers. So if anyone's wanting to lease or purchase a home in the Dallas area, give me a call. But anyway, so yeah, that's what Renee and
Can
I
you
do. We
can you tell me
really
about your Facebook
love our
page?
jobs.
You
Oh yeah,
do.
I have a Facebook page. It's called Lawson Real Crystal Lawson, comma Lawson Realty Group.
I have to
So
think about it.
that's me.
Um,
Yeah, I had to think about that.
she's being so modest. She does a great job. I've seen you sell several houses, and you're so good with your customers. And she just like really works so hard for people. Of course, that's just your personality. You're a great person, and you
Aw.
do a great job. So I can't wait till I get an opportunity to buy a house, and I have my own personal friend slash real estate agent.
Aw, thank you. That's
You're
so
welcome.
sweet. And then what's really cool is you can fill it up with all Southern Comfort and more stuff. So it's like a
Right.
win-win. I love
Yeah.
it. Well, thank you. That's a really, really sweet compliment. I love my clients, and I do enjoy working really hard for them and getting results. So, okay, enough of our infomercial. Let's see what else. Oh, you know what? Here's another question that we get, and then we'll go back to Missy. But another question we get is, how did we come up with the name for our podcast?
Oh, yeah.
And this was really funny because Renee, we didn't know what to call it, and we were just bouncing the idea around. And then Renee was smart. She always comes up with these ways to research stuff. So she had a list that she found somehow of ideas for podcasts. How did you get that list?
I the good old
Podcast
Google.
names.
There's actually a website that gives you they help you with business names or podcast names or whatever it is that you're trying to do. And so I found the app, and so I plugged in
Okay.
different things on there, and it came up with a list. And then I read you the list, and then you can go ahead and tell the rest.
Okay, yeah. So that was funny. So Renee is just reading off all these names, and we're kind of commenting on him. That's okay. I don't know. Man, I don't know. And so then you said you rattled it off one after the other, and you go true crime broadcast. And I just went, what about true crime broads? And that just tickled
Yes,
us.
we
And so
laughed.
we took the cast off of broadcast, and we actually bounced around some other names, but we kept coming back to that one because it kind of made us laugh. And my husband was saying it's kind of like, those old gumshoe detective shows. They would refer to women as
Yep.
broads. So it's kind of like that old fashioned, like a 1940s detective movie kind of vibe to it. So,
Right,
which I wasn't even thinking of that angle,
right.
but sure, yeah, that'll work. So that's just kind of where we got the name. So thank you guys. You guys are so sweet to even care about us. And thanks for asking those questions.
Yeah, that was really cool.
And, and the only reason that we met was because of Missy Bevers. We mentioned that on the first uh episode, and I just know that she would be so happy that that happened, and that she would be proud of that legacy that she has left behind, that she actually has brought together a lot of people. A lot of people have done fun runs in her name. There's just been so much. Obviously it would be way better if she was alive and well with her family, but at least there have been some good that has come out of this tremendous tragedy. And I think one of them is a lot of friendships were made, and a lot of people have been working hard to try to raise money and to try to raise awareness, and just all sorts of things. Those they do those runs. I think it's in Waxahachie. Is that right, Renee, for
Yes,
her every
yeah, I
year?
believe that it was in Waxahachie the last time, and I think the second time. But of course, Renee Jones was one of her very good friends, and she was also the director of Camp Gladiator. And so I believe that she's from the Waxahachie area. I mean, I don't mean that's where she lives, but I know that that's where I believe she had classes and so forth. So that's where I
Yeah.
think it's like downtown Waxahachie or maybe Getzendaner Park, one of the two.
And there was and I don't even know if this is a separate one than that. I think it is. There was also one with the Salvation Army for Missy, Missy's memory, another
Mhm.
run. Or it might be the same
Yeah,
one.
the Salvation
I might be
Army is
confused.
also located in Waxahachie, over off of I can't remember the street, but anyway, it doesn't matter. But yeah, there is a Salvation Army in
Yeah.
Waxahachie. That may be where they had that one also.
Yeah, that's really cool. So, people have been really rallying around this cause now for four years. And so, the public hasn't forgotten about Missy. I know that law enforcement hasn't forgotten about Missy, but it's so easy to slip into thinking that they have, but I really don't think that they have. I think this is weighing heavy on the local law enforcement every single day. We haven't heard anything from the district attorney's office, but I have to hope that they're engaged as well. So, is there anything we wanted to cover on this
Yes.
episode that we didn't? I know we wanted to recap and we wanted to dedicate it to Missy's memory, but go
I
ahead.
actually almost forgot this, and I'm so glad I did. When I say it, you'll know what I'm talking about. Okay, so the other day I was doing what I always do and just searching around for things, and I found a post by Creekside Church of Christ, the church where Missy was murdered,
Yes.
and there was a picture of a truck. And I don't know, I can't tell you what happened with this truck, but I can tell you that it was on October 22nd of 2013. They posted a picture of a truck, and it was in their parking lot, and this person had to have done something, because they posted three pictures it was either 3 or 4, and the vehicle on one angle, like a camera caught it on one angle, and you could see the truck, and it said, "Notice the dual tailpipes." Okay, and then another picture was a completely different angle, and it said, "Notice the right side has a dent in it." And then another one, and it said, "Notice blah blah blah." I can't remember the other one, but anyway, there was 3 or 4 different angles of this truck, and it had done something because they were saying, "Please share." They didn't go into details on the post of what had happened, but something had happened. But the interesting thing is that their surveillance camera caught this vehicle driving around their parking lot.
And guess what? It was
Yep, and it was
outside.
outside.
It was not in that truck was not inside the church.
Exactly. And it wasn't, just because I mean, it was different angles. So I don't know what had happened. If maybe anybody knows what happened, it was just, just out of curiosity. But, like I said, the point of that whole thing is to say that their surveillance cameras on the outside of their parking lot caught this truck on camera in several different directions, which tells me that they had surveillance cameras around the church on the outside of the building. So, that just makes you wonder why nothing was caught on the outside of the
And
church the morning that this was
if I
happening.
remember correctly, that photograph you're talking about of the truck outside that the surveillance camera picked up at Creekside in the parking lot, wasn't that dated 2015?
No, it was 2013.
Oh, I thought it was 2014 or 15. I thought it was more
No,
recent. Okay. So apparently those whoa, sorry. Uh, what? I'm sorry. I googled Missy Bevers to see if I could find anything about the
I
anniversary,
looked through it. I didn't
and
see
it's and it's and it's freaking started the video, y'all. I'm sorry. Hang on. I'm just got to close the laptop. I don't know how to make it stop. Okay. So anyway, sorry, I'm all distracted now. Oh, but so apparently that pickup truck photograph outside, whenever that happened between Missy's murder, at some point in between, the outside surveillance camera stopped working. Tim reminded us that MPD had said that there was no evidence that the outdoor camera had been tampered with. But I mean, MPD has said some misleading things, so we don't know if that's true or not. But, I tend to think it probably just wasn't working because they just hadn't gotten around to fixing
right.
it. But, we've all toyed with the idea of maybe the perpetrator knew to disengage it,
Right.
either ahead of time, a couple hours before. Maybe that's what the Nissan Altima was, involved in, or maybe it just those cameras just weren't working,
Yeah.
So it's just really strange, and that's something else about this case. I always wanted to talk to the pastor of Creekside because if he would talk to us, because surely he could answer that question. He would know what was going on in his own church. Why was the camera not working? How long was it not working? Was it simply, did someone accidentally turn it off and never turned it back on? Or was it in need of repair and that was just sort of hadn't been done yet? Was it just a coincidence? Did it break that night? I mean, that day, a week before? I would just kind of like to know the history of why on earth was the indoor cameras were obviously working fine. We've got the perpetrator walking all over the church, but what was going on with that outdoor camera? We've never heard any kind of an answer on that. As far as we can tell, the media hasn't pressed and asked that question, because when you hear an article about it or you see it in the news conference, no, the outdoor camera wasn't working. No one says why. I mean, that would be my first question is, well, was it just simply in need of repair? Or had it been broken for a long time and it's not fixable and you just haven't replaced it? I would really like to know what went on there. That's just kind of bizarre to have cameras all over the inside of a building, but the outside camera not be operational. That's a really important one to catch cars coming in and out, catch vandalism, catch all kinds of stuff
Yeah, because if
outside.
that could be the only, obviously only key evidence that you get is a license plate or a vehicle, at least a close, because this vehicle that was on that camera, you might not have been able to see the license plate, but you could definitely tell it was a blue Ford truck. I mean, clear as day, dual
Yeah.
tailpipes. So it was like, wow, that would have
And
been
well, yeah. and then you get that state of the art lab out in Tarrant County, or you get the FBI. Somebody would have some kind of enhancing software that could probably tell us what the license plate is.
Exactly.
It's always miraculous the stuff that the software can
Right.
do. So yeah, I like you said, there's so much stuff about this case that doesn't make sense to us, and I really hope it does someday, because then that will mean that we're really close to getting justice for Missy. But right now we have a big pile of mysteries.
That is the truth. I mean, seriously, it's like you just think that, they had so much information and so much that the video of the surveillance of the perpetrator, and it blows your mind that you don't have anything with all of what you have equals nothing, basically.
Oh, and you know what else I was thinking I wanted to bring up on this episode, and I should have run this by you earlier, but it's not anything we need to research. We've talked about this enough, but I thought it might be interesting to sort of talk about someone who was cleared, and he was cleared in the news. So I'm not bringing up a private citizen and smearing their name, because this has already been in the public and it's been documented. But it was in the Waxahachie Light, I believe. They had a perpetrator named, I'm sorry, I said a perpetrator. They had a person who apparently there had been a lot of online rumors about, and he used to be a cop, or he was working for the Dallas Marshal at the time of Missy's murder, and he actually was an acquaintance, I think, of Missy and Brandon. Don't really know a whole lot about him other than just a bunch of crazy rumors and stuff, but his name was Lyle Valentik, and he got some action in the Facebook groups as far as gossip goes. But there were some pictures on his Facebook page apparently of him wearing tactical gear, but NPD made it clear, look, don't look over here. There's nothing to see, and this guy's been cleared. But I just felt like we should at least bring that up, because I know a lot of our listeners have asked us about him. They'll say, "What about that guy that moved to Ohio? He was a cop." So, even though he was never apparently a serious person of interest, he did get mentioned in a publication. I believe it was the Waxahachie Light. We can link that for the listeners, but they cleared him. So it's kind of interesting how we have him being cleared, but Casey Williams, that we've talked about on a couple of other podcasts, we actually have search warrant activity. Oh, that's something else I wanted to mention. There's no search warrant activity on Lyle Valentik. I do not believe he was ever a serious candidate for this murder as far as law enforcement is concerned.
Yeah, I found the article.
What do you
It
think?
was Waxahachie Daily Light, and it's dated January 14th, 2017. Andrew
Yes.
Bronca was the editor for it. It says Midlothian Assistant Police Chief Kevin Johnson said a name that has been circulating online, Lyle Valentik, was considered a person of interest at one point. However, the tip, which was closed out months ago, did not materialize, and Valentik was never considered a suspect. So,
Now, wait a minute. Okay, so the article said he was considered a person of interest at one
yep,
time, but then they later say he was never a
yeah,
suspect.
a suspect. He was a person of interest, just somebody that I guess
Okay.
maybe somebody called in a tip, so they were going to check it out, but they never
Okay.
materialized into an actual suspect.
Yeah, I gotcha. All right. Well, yeah, the only reason I wanted to bring him up is we've had so many questions about him, and when enough people inquire about something, I feel like, okay, we probably need to address that on a podcast episode. So, yeah, he was apparently not really an interest to the law enforcement in this case, but he had apparently there was a whirlwind of rumors surrounding him, and probably just the Facebook groups, I would imagine. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree, and I'll read you this part too because this is kind of enlightening, I guess you could say. It says, in general, I can say with a dozen of specific persons of interest that were called in that we ran them through a variety of filters, which included the potential connection to the victim, which is important, or the church. Johnson said, obviously, their alibi at the time of the offense, their height, weight, background, and then with most of them, there were face-to-face interviews. So none of that really led to him become, I guess they just made a typo here because it says, so none of that really led him, sorry, none of that led to him become more than just a person we had a tip on. They made a mistake there. But anyway, I was trying to read it correctly, but it was hard because I was reading the words. Anyway,
No, I get it. That's
it
cool.
says Johnson.
No, I'm glad you found it that quickly.
It says
Thank you.
Johnson said that tip was provided to police in May or June. So that would have been, I don't know if it would have been May or June of 2016 or 17, but anyway. So yeah, I just wanted to read it because sometimes, especially me and you, we go through so many articles and so many different bits of information, and it all just kind of starts running together.
I am telling you, it sure does. But yeah, so Lyle Valentek, we wanted to just kind of clear that up. He was apparently not actually any kind of a suspect, but they did feel the need to publicly clear him because a bunch of stuff hit the fan, and it was when Alan Duke. Um, there was a podcast called Crime Online at the time, and it was Nancy Grace's podcast, and she did an episode where her sidekick, who I really like, his name is Alan Duke. I always think it's interesting when he speaks. He said he had spoken to Midlothian police and they had an ex cop they're about to arrest. Well, obviously that didn't happen. That was like what, 2.5 years ago or something, or 3 years at this point almost. And anyway, I think what happened is all the gossip groups went bananas because they assumed it was Lyle Valentek, but in reality, it was probably the other suspect, Bobby Henry, that ended up, as far as we know, he's cleared. We don't really know. MPD said he was also cleared, but I think that the public's perception of that podcast was that they were talking about Lyle Valentek, and that's what started everyone down freaking out. And I think that that's why MPD felt the need to clear him publicly. That's just my guess looking at what happened during that
It is
time
interesting,
period.
though, that they basically cleared him, and yet they say that they will not clear anyone until the case is solved. So I thought that was interesting, but I mean, I guess I don't make the
Yeah.
rules, so
And you know what? I mean, I was going to say, obviously the point of this podcast is to remember Missy. It's the anniversary. And then we also wanted to recap our last two guests. But then I was also saying we could probably call this episode what does it mean to be cleared? Because they have cleared a few people. But then, like you said, they've also said no one's cleared, you know. So what does that mean? It's interesting. We get a lot of double talk and a lot of confusing things.
that would
Whenever
be a good
MPD speaks
question
out.
for a
So,
retired homicide, a retired police officer, any of those, police people that work in the police departments. If you know anybody who would be interested in being on our podcast, that would be a great question for them because these are things we don't know because neither one of us, as much as I love criminal justice, I took all the classes in college. I really wanted to be an investigator. And then for some strange reason, I thought I had to be a police officer and I didn't want any part of that. I don't want to be in a car going 100 unless I'm the one driving. And then I don't even want to do that. So I decided not to do it. So
yeah.
those are things that me and you don't know. We don't know the answers to those. But somebody who was in you know that type of work and that field, they would know the answers to most of these or a lot of these questions, or at least give us some insight. So if y'all know anybody who's in that field that would be interested in being on a podcast and answering some of these questions, please send them our way.
Well, you know what else is interesting is we have talked to some ex cops, and I had one tell me that they've never seen anything like this. The lack of communication from MPD really doesn't make any sense to him. So, don't know. I think this case is a little bit different in the way it's being handled than most because you and I have watched so many cases unfold, and I don't remember seeing police be this tight-lipped about any case. At least there's some kind of information. You knew if the case was moving forward or not. You knew, even if they didn't tell you who the suspect was, you knew if they were zeroing in on someone. It's really strange. It's almost like the media and law enforcement for this case are working together to be quiet, which I really don't think it's that type of conspiracy. I just think the media backed off a little more quickly than I would have liked them to. But yeah, it's really interesting. I don't
I
know
don't
what to
either.
make of all this
But another
silence.
thing that I thought about, and I've thought about this often, and this is just a whole kind of not really a whole different aspect, but You remember a few years ago when someone, and I don't remember where this was posted, but maybe you will because you're good about that, where someone posted, hey, such and such channel, news, Fox 4, whatever, I don't know, is going to be in Midlothian talking to people about the Missy Bevers case. Oh my gosh, I wanted to go so bad, but I couldn't because we were actually out of state at the time working. I don't know, we were in Nebraska or Colorado or something, I don't know. So I couldn't go, but I wanted to go so bad. But we've never heard anything about that. And I can't imagine that nobody showed up. So I'm just curious if any of our listeners ever or knew anybody who maybe attended that. I'm just kind of curious whatever come of that because that was a pretty good idea to get
Yeah.
people there and talking and hearing what people are saying. But literally, it was mum's the word. And I hadn't heard a word about it.
Yeah. That's pretty weird. I don't know either. I know nothing about that.
Yeah, I'm just curious if anybody knows. Maybe somebody will give us some insight into that because I haven't heard any more about it. So I was just curious. But I think that would be a good way to talk to people, just to kind of round up some people at one time, maybe for like an hour and just kind of get people's insight, what people are thinking, what people are, their fears, their thoughts, whatever. I think it would be cool to do that again. I don't know if we could maybe find somebody else that would do that, but that would be neat. And this time I'll be there. I'm sure you will be too.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. Um so did we have anything else we're going to
No,
cover?
I think that's about it. I do want to say, I think, and this is just again me thinking out loud, and I haven't talked to you about it, but that's okay. We can just do it on air and let everybody hear it. But maybe
Yeah,
the
why not?
next podcast, since this is the anniversary of her death, we will the next one will maybe do another unsolved murder and take a break from her case just for one episode or something. I mean, I know we talk about it a little bit anyway, especially if there's something to come up, but
Yeah.
I think that would be a good time to throw another unsolved case in there. So if anybody has any that they know about that they would like to hear us talk about, let us know.
Yeah, and I was kind of thinking the Delphi case, since it gets brought up so much in
Right.
conjunction with Missy's case, that might be a good one to. There's a couple of parallels, and we can go over that in the podcast, or maybe save that one for next time. I'm open totally. Oh, and I was going to say, please don't forget to contact us if you have any questions or answers to some of our questions that we've been asking on the podcast. We'd love to hear from you, but I do want to say, if you're a pervert, please don't send us a message or a friend, or don't follow us on Instagram. I mean, how many perverted
Oh
things
my
have
gosh,
we
it's
deleted
been
lately? It's
crazy. I
ridiculous.
mean, it's like, first of all, they're not even sending the correct gender to us. They're sending us pictures of females, and we're like, okay, true crime broads. We don't want female things. I mean, we don't want anything, but we're just saying you're not even getting it right, so go away.
Yeah. Yeah. So please, if you're a pervert, just keep moving. Okay. We want to hear from our actual listeners. Yes, we
Yep.
want to hear from you. But yeah, that's been interesting on Instagram. It's like a rash. I guess everyone's on quarantine, and whatever crazy stuff you're prone to
And
do,
it's
you're
so
going to ratchet
weird
it up.
that they
You're going to
just
crank it
flock to
up.
one, you know, social media platform. It's so strange. It's like Facebook, we haven't had any problems. We haven't had any problems on Twitter. But I mean, Instagram, they're just coming in through the privacy. I'm like, what is happening? Like every day, it's like, do you click on this link and I'll show you. No, you're not going to show me anything. Goodbye. Oh, it's so nerve-wracking. It's like, come on. But yeah, I know we both had to do our share of deleting stuff. It's just been stupid.
Oh, I know. It's been so funny, but a little comic relief in a really
Oh
sad
yeah,
case
you
every
gotta,
now
you
and
gotta have a
then.
little bit.
Um, but does but yeah, for our listeners, if you have any questions, if there's anything you want us to cover, we're here for you guys. We're here to keep Missy's memory alive, and hopefully bring some attention to her case. And I'm really hoping that people out there, like, like the John Kellys, like the Joseph Scott Morgans, and people like that, are getting interested in the case. And Joseph Scott Morgan already was interested in the case. I think you mentioned earlier he was on a Nancy Grace episode about Missy Bevers during the first year that she was murdered. So his interest level is already there. We're getting John Kelly seems to be really interested in the case now, and we're hoping to see some content from him on the case in the future. And we just want to keep that momentum going. We don't like the way that Missy kind of stopped being covered in the media. We don't like that at all. So we're taking this alternative media opportunity we have here called podcasting to hopefully get some attention on Missy and her case. And we're open to suggestions and would love to hear from any of you that have any ideas or know anyone who
Right.
might be able to
And
help.
the thing to keep in mind is, and we say this every time, but it's just, I guess, one of those things that you have to keep reminding people, just like some of the crazy nonsense that's been happening with this coronavirus. Don't take your gloves off and throw them on the ground. Take them with you. Kind of like that. But don't take this stuff to real life. You can't just go out there and start, number one, you can't start accusing somebody. I mean, we might all speculate, but we don't get on the internet and say XYZ did it. This person did it. Y'all need to pay attention. I mean, that's just not a good idea, because you could actually get sued for that if that causes that person to lose anything, like a job or a family member or, anything. You don't want to do that, because, again, how would you feel if you did accuse somebody and they're 100%, innocent, and you start making people, because I'm one of those people that if somebody accused of somebody of murder, I mean, I wouldn't just take off, but I would be like, whoa, what's going on here? And I would be speculating and getting a little nervous. I'm sure everybody would be that way.
That's about the darn, that's got to be the worst thing you could accuse someone of. So yeah, and that's why on True Crime Broads we're very careful to stick to the public records. When we are saying something that's a rumor, we point out that it's a rumor, and we simply don't know what's going on in this case. We don't know who the number one suspect is. We can follow where the evidence leads us, where the information leads us, but at the end of the day, we really and truly don't know what's going on behind the walls of Midlothian Police Department. So we really try to not editorialize here on the air and try to just bring forward the facts about, you know, who we think could have done this and why. And I'm sure there's not a why. There's never a reason to kill anyone. I hate to say why, but you know, what could possibly be a motive for something this horrific? So we bounce this stuff around constantly, and we'll continue to do so until this case is
Yeah.
solved. So that's
Exactly
why we're
right.
here.
We do look forward to everybody's input too, and I know we've said that, but it's really good to get people's feedback and their questions and things like that. And Crystal, thinking about speaking of that, I think that there was someone. I have no idea why that just made that noise. But there was somebody, Barry, who sent us a question that he wanted us to go over, and it was right about the time that Joseph Scott Morgan and John Kelly was going to be a guest on our podcast. So I think we need to go back and check
Yeah.
and see what it was that he wanted to, what his question was. I mean, I don't know if you know what it is, or did you see it?
Oh, and for the listeners, that's a different
Yes.
Barry than the physical therapist we were talking about earlier. Barry is one of the people that we've met in the groups and kind of befriended over the years. And you know what? I do remember him now making a list. So let's pop that out on the next episode.
Yeah.
That's
So
a really good
we wanted
idea.
to apologize for missing that question, because, like I said, it was literally, if I remember right, seeing it, it was like the day before we did those two podcasts, and we kind of had to throw those together quickly. So we'll do that on our next one.
Sounds like a plan. Well, I think that we paraded our adult ADHD out
We
for everyone to
did.
see this episode. So we were just
We
all
were
over
bouncing
the
around.
place, but that's okay. I don't know how we're going to think of a title for this one. We're just going to have to call
Right.
it the anniversary. There's no way to contain
Exactly.
all the rambling, but if anyone wants to make some suggestions, pop on and talk to us. Perverts, stay away, and we will look forward to talking to you next time. Thank you so much for
We
tuning
appreciate
into
it.
True
Good
Crime.
night. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast, and it's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast all in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today.